Let me go back to, for example, after he announced this, the media, I'm starting to read every article, right?
Yeah.
And criticizing you that, here's a guy, came out of Ohio, his support for a national abortion ban and his twisted belief that women should stay in violent marriages for the benefit of their children exemplifies his dangerous extremism. He's not just wrong for Ohio, he's wrong for the country. I actually saw those articles this weekend. And I said, why would I wait? I wanted to know the answer. I called you.
Yeah.
How do you address that?
Well, look, Sean, first of all, Democrats have completely twisted my words here. And as you know, both me and my mom actually were victims of domestic violence. When they say that, Vance is support.
This is libtard-ass answers, bro. He's like, wow, when you say this to me, you're saying this to a domestic abuse victim. It's like, what are you talking about? You're literally running for the domestic abuse ticket. Like, Trump is the president on your ticket. The fuck do you mean? You should be like, libtards are gay and they make up the issue of domestic violence. It's not a real problem at all. The real problem is men aren't strong enough to knock out their wives or some shit. Like, you're Republican. Like, men have become more soy. Back in my day, they used to end it all with one hit.
Supported women staying in violent marriages. I think it's shameful for them to take a guy with my history and my background and say that that's what I believe. It's not what I believe. It's not what I said. And I think, Sean, it's evidence of the Democrats' complete inability to talk about the future. What are Republicans running on? Delivering the peace and prosperity that Donald Trump already delivered in his 4 years. What are Democrats running on? Lies and complete distortions of people's records. That is something I think the American people are going to reject. They're too smart for it.
I said on January 2nd, when the year started, I said, let me tell you what this year is going to be like. And I try to give a perspective to my audience. It's not my first rodeo,
that's right.
JD. And I said, the Democrats are going to try to make this election about, quote, democracy in peril. How often have we heard that? Meanwhile, they might want to disenfranchise every primary voter that they had.
What kind of question is that, dude? What did I want on the Republican ticket? Doug Burgum, my goat, my king. Beautiful eyebrows, handsome look, strong jawline. Don't know a single fucking thing about his positions, but it don't matter. It's vibes based.
And they wanted to get Donald Trump off the ticket in some states. Another example, it'd be about January 6th. It would be about abortion. We hate Donald Trump.
Exactly right.
Can they run on the issue, is the country better off than it was 4 years ago?
Of course they can't, Sean. They can't run on that at all. And they can't run on the issue of, is the world more peaceful than it was 4 years ago? Remember when Donald Trump left office, you had real growing peace movements all over the world. The Abraham Accords that showed a real promise of uniting the Israelis with some of the Sunni Arab states. There was no war in Europe. Asia looked like it was under pretty good control. And 3 years later, it seems like we have a conflict in every corner of the world. And Americans are poor, Sean. You know a little about my background. I grew up in a poor family. I remember when my grandmother, who raised me, she used to negotiate with the Meals on Wheels people to give her additional food so that she could feed me. How does a family like that deal with Joe Biden's grocery price inflation? How does a family like that deal with gasoline and energy price inflation? It's gotten more expensive just to live a good life in this country. Donald Trump and I want to make that better, and we have policies to make it better. Democrats have lies and distortions, and again, I don't think the American people are going to reward that.
I had an opportunity to talk to Donald Trump, and I knew this question would come up actually for almost every person that was under consideration.
Sure.
And that was past comments.
I think J.D. Vance has been pandering to liberals for so long. He has that exact same Democratic air of insincerity that dumbass Republicans are able to usually avoid. Like, there are a lot of Republicans out there who, in my opinion, do a better job of like presenting themselves as like, hoorah, I'm a man of the people. I think he's too lib-coded because he's been pandering to liberals for too long.
That you had made about him, and when I'll tell you after what his response was, but
sure.
you didn't have the nicest things to say about him back in 2016, which seems like a long time ago now. You literally said, you texted a friend that Trump is a cynical a-hole like Nixon who wouldn't be that bad and might even prove useful, and that he's America's Hitler, and you compared him to a cultural heroine in the Atlantic Monthly. And I'll tell you Trump's response, but you said that then. What do you say to people that say, well, wait a minute? What did he mean?
Well, Sean, I don't hide from that. I was certainly skeptical of Donald Trump in 2016, but President Trump was a great.
I love that because it's like, yeah, dude, I was really stupid back then. I was duped by the media, you know, when I was like 35. Very different. I'm 40 now. So glad he's like, yeah, I was just stupid and impressionable.
President, and he changed my mind. I think he changed the minds of a lot of Americans because, again, he delivered that peace and prosperity. If you go back to what I thought in 2016, another thing that was going on, Sean, is I bought into the media's lies and distortions. I bought into this idea that somehow he was going to be so different, a terrible threat to democracy. It was a joke. Joe Biden is the one who's trying to throw his political opposition in jail. Joe Biden is the one who's trying to undermine American law and order. President Trump did a really good job. And I actually think it's a good thing when you see somebody, you were wrong about him, you ought to admit the mistake and admit that you were wrong.
When I brought it up to him, he said...
I can't wait for this.
Okay, when I brought it up to him, he said, yeah. He goes, but he doesn't think that way now, does he? So he actually had a very good sense of humor about it. It also says a lot about him, and he understands. Were you as political back then?
Not really, Sean. I mean, you know, my book came out in 2016, Hillbilly Elegy. It's
Not really. This motherfucker was giving TED Talks about what to do with the white working class, bro. Not really.
really the sort of the story of growing up in poverty, achieving the American dream, starting out in business. And I really didn't care that much about politics. I certainly had views. I was a Republican, but I was not nearly as involved, obviously, as I am today. And again, there's something that really changed for me, and I think for a lot of Americans, is we saw the results of the Trump presidency compared to the obsessive, deranged media reaction in 2019 and 2020. Like, what's going on? What's so bad about this guy that he's delivered rising wages for American workers and peace in the world? Why is the media so obsessed with him? I think a lot of Americans actually have had a similar awakening over the last few years because you compare the results with the reaction, and clearly the people with the reaction to the problem, that's not President Trump's problem.
No, a lot of people forget, too, back in the first debate, I believe it was, and Kamala Harris was on the stage with Joe Biden at the time, and she said, I was that girl. If you remember that moment,
Yeah.
It was a very hard-hitting moment. And what she was referring to is the fact that Joe Biden had partnered with a former Klansman and tried to stop the integration of public schools. Joe Biden's words, he didn't want those schools to become racial jungles. And
Sean, Kamala Harris basically said Joe Biden wouldn't want a little black girl like me to.
Damn, bro. I think they want the Democrats to win. Talking about how white supremacist Joe Biden is like on Fox News is going to make Fox News watchers change their attitude about him. There's like 78-year-olds in the chat watching Sean Hannity going, wait a minute. Wait, hold on now. Did you say Jim Crow Joe, separate but equal? I think this guy seems kind of cool.
Live in her neighborhood. He also palled around with Klansmen. She said this months before she joined his ticket, Sean. I said some bad things about Donald Trump 10 years ago, but I think it's actually important to be able, again, to admit that you're wrong. And I think I can make a good case to the American people who may have been skeptical of the president back in 2016, who can be skeptical now that we've seen the results.
All right, let's talk about a little bit, and I think these are important times and consequential times.
Sure.
And we see what's happening with the border, for example. I think it's now become the #1 national security threat.
Oh, absolutely.
And we have nearly 11 million unvetted Joe Biden illegal immigrants in this country. What should we do with them?
Well, Sean, we have to deport people. We have to deport people who broke our laws, who came in here, and I think we start with the violent criminals. And President Trump has been very, very effective at communicating on this. So to the point where now a majority of Americans believe that we need to deport a large number of people who have come here illegally. That's a major political victory for him, and I think it's going to lead to a policy victory for the American people. But, Sean, we have to talk about the fentanyl problem because this is something that I know extremely personally. And we have close to 100,000 Americans dying of drug overdoses every single year. Most of it is brought in by Mexican drug cartels, manufactured in China, then brought in by these cartels. To get a little personal, you know, my mom struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. That's why my...
Oh my God, bro. God, he's such a whiner. Oh, my mom. My mom, she was addicted. Oh, my mom. Like, you're a Republican, dude. God damn. Stop fucking crying. Stop fucking crying about, like, how your mommy was doing crack or whatever. Like, what? Yeah, what are you, Batman? Oh, my parents were killed. My parents were killed. It dramatically altered the trajectory of my life. My parents were killed. It's like, dude, stop trauma dumping. Bro, he's a 40-year-old man talking about like his mom being addicted to heroin. He wrote a book about it. He literally shit all over her and everyone else from those towns, talks about them like they're motherfucking mountain people with like a different skull that makes them more predisposed to doing fentanyl. And also, all the while, he was like simultaneously getting fucking funded by the very same pharmaceutical corporations that was responsible for his entire fucking community perishing into opiate hell. He got so much play from fucking suburban wine moms who was like, how could Donald Trump become president? We must understand the mind of the mountain person in rural Appalachia. And then like the entire message in the book is that, yeah, mountain people are different. Okay. They're a different kind of white. They have a different cultural inferiority to the good liberal kind of white people that you see in the cities. And the bad mountain people, well, they sing songs and they dance and they have this like different bone in their brain that causes them to be addicted to fentanyl. And it has nothing to do with the pharmaceutical corporations absolutely pumping and offloading a shit ton of drugs to these communities with like no real valid way of doing any kind of meaningful healthcare reform in these areas. We shouldn't do that anyway because my donors would hate that. And also, simultaneously, those mountain people have like a uniquely inferior culture of not being self-reliant, not realizing that they can change their own destiny. Why aren't they succeeding? Well, it's because they didn't listen to the right podcasts, okay? I don't think a single goddamn person gives a shit about where he's coming from, and I think they just like Donald Trump.
Grandmother, who I call Mamaw, raised me. But the coolest thing, maybe the greatest blessing of my life, is that my mom is about to celebrate 10 years sober.
I don't want to see a 40-year-old man talk about Mima Mama, bro. Come on. You went to Yale. Shut the fuck up, Mima Mama.
And she is able to celebrate 10 years sober, frankly, because the poison that's coming across the border now wasn't coming across in such large numbers 15 years ago. We are depriving Americans of a second chance with their loved ones. You cannot keep on doing this. You're orphaning an entire generation of kids. Go to Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Sean. You have thousands of grandparents raising grandchildren that they weren't expecting to raise because of the poison Joe Biden let it come across the border. President Trump is the guy to stop this. And if we don't stop it, we're going to lose a generation of young kids.
You know, when I saw you in Atlanta,
He doesn't even sound angry. Like he literally he doesn't even sound mad. When Donald Trump talks about this shit, he's like, I fucking hate those immigrants. I fucking hate them. They're bringing drugs across the border. They want to kill your mother. They want to kill your father. They want to rape your daughters. What is he even saying, lol? He's trying to do the Trumpian shit where he's like, yeah, fentanyl addiction is happening because Mexicans. You can't, on the one hand, fucking say unimaginably reactionary shit while simultaneously crying about your mima and mama and papa, okay? Just be racist. That's it. He's trying to lib code racism.
I said I felt a little embarrassed because I was one of the few Americans, because most people knew Hillbilly Elegy. It was a massive bestseller that became a movie. And I literally read at least a book a day researching
I know you do.
Radio and television. And so I decided
Fuck off.
to watch the movie. And when I saw you, I did ask you, is this really what your life was? Appalachia? And this is the history of your life. Appalachia, you become a Marine. And by the way, your mom was a drug addict and an alcoholic. Your father, not exactly the greatest father in the world. And you grew up poor, and you had an amazing grandmother that came out of your life too.
That's right.
But then you joined the Marines, you served in Iraq, you came out of school, you went to Ohio State, you went to Yale, you prospered at Yale. Then you went on to be successful in business, which, by the way, Democrats are criticizing you for. They wish you failed, I guess, when they wrote that. Considering where you came from, it's the American dream. And then, you know, you got into politics, and you did so successfully. A pretty amazing story. Give us some texture and context to.
Yeah, you got into politics. You did so successfully because, once again, a gay libertarian villain who is obsessed with the bad guys in Lord of the Rings gave you $10 million and dumped an unimaginable amount of funds on top of that in ad spend so that you can barely get carried across a finish line in a fucking state where Donald Trump won by 8 points. He's not a good candidate. He's not a good vice presidential candidate. He was apparently, and I didn't even know this originally, he was literally texting teenagers on Twitter in group chats. That's what the fuck Ed Incrementum was talking about when he was like, oh, JD Vance is compromised. JD Vance is compromised. He's got a weird case. Why is he around? It turns out that motherfucker was in the group chats with him. Yeah, he was in group chats with teen groypers, dude, which is crazy. I think he's only VP because of Peter Thiel. No, exactly. That's the only reason why he's worth a damn in Donald Trump's eyes, in my opinion. I thought this was a joke. Why does Senator Vance refer to a group chat with children in it as the Simps chat? I'm politely asking Cleveland to follow me back, says Caleb Burdett. Yo, Akron Caleb is thirsty, says JD Vance. Caleb, it is so over, Napoleon Complex sufferer responds. Just practicing my cool kid lingo with the Simps chat. VP issues in 1992, spelling the word potato wrong one time. VP issues in 2024. JD Vance follows Bronze Age lowly Hitler rape groyper.
I have to say, you have to have some humility about this. It's the biggest job in the world. But I served my country successfully in the United States Marine Corps. I had a successful business career. And I have the vision and the agenda aligned with President Trump to make the American worker better off, to bring peace to the world, and to actually advance an agenda that's good for American citizens. I think the experience that maybe most Americans would care about, it's not that I spent 2 years in the Senate, and I think I've had a very successful 2 years in the Senate. It's that I came from nothing, became a United States Marine, and succeeded in business. That's the experience that I think gives you a fresh perspective. You combine that with the ability to get things done.
Bro, I can't listen to him. It's so boring.